Adventure Time's just never gonna end, is it? This Cartoon Network classic from like 2010 ran for a whole 10 seasons, then scored an extra 4 specials only like a year later. And now the Adventure Time universe expands even more with the new spin-off series, Fionna and Cake. So where'd all this come from? Well, this junk goes all the way back to 2011 in Season 3, Episode 9 of Adventure Time, Fionna and Cake. This was a fun alternate universe story featuring an entirely gender-swapped version of the Adventure Time cast. Finn was now Fionna, Jake was Cake, Princess Bubblegum was Prince Gumball, Ice King was the Ice Queen, etc, etc. And speaking of the Ice King, the twist of the whole episode was that it was all a fanfiction made up by the Ice King. And now that little one-off episode from 12 years ago has become the springboard for a whole new, much more adult-oriented Adventure Time spin-off series. That's right, Ice King can swear now. And of course, another season of Adventure Time means now I gotta swoop in with my dumb voice and bad drawings to recap the whole series for you right here. Not to replace watching the show or anything, but just to be like, I don't know, a SparkNotes version. But I have to say now, Fionna and Cake isn't just some silly cartoon spin-off. This is a full canon continuation of the Adventure Time series, and it is not particularly friendly to newcomers. To fully understand and appreciate the places this show goes, you kinda gotta know your Adventure Time lore. All 13 years of it. I'm not joking. This stuff goes pretty deep right out of the gate. So if you haven't seen it already, you may want to check out my other recap of the main Adventure Time series and the Distant Land specials to get a quick refresh on the mountain of lore this show is based on. And with all that said, this is everything you need to know about Adventure Time, Fionna and Cake. So, we start the series with Fionna and Cake waking up from a weird dream where they were in a magical world fighting evil and saving people and stuff, but that's silly. That's not what Fionna and Cake is. She's stupid. Fionna's not a fearless warrior in a magical world. She's just your average 20-something in a crappy apartment having trouble keeping a job. And Cake is just a cat. Regular cat. Look at my friend's cat. Regular cat, just like him. Fionna lives your average city sitcom lifestyle with her friends Gary Prince, Bubblegum, and Marceline, who I'm sure won't have their differences but discover their two sides of the same coin and ultimately get together in a very sweet and romantic way. I have absolutely no reason to believe any of that will happen based on any past source material. So anyway, Fionna's having a bad day. She got fired from her job, Cake's acting up, and for some reason, neither of them can get that weird dream off their mind. Fionna keeps thinking about this ice prince she saw in the dream, and Cake has just become absolutely fascinated by ice stuff in general. Like, it makes her act all crazy. To the point that she ran off, jumped inside an ice cream vendor's cart, and just disappeared. Straight up vanished. Meanwhile, in more familiar territory, we find Simon Petrikov in the land of Oo. You remember him, right? That dude who put on a cursed crown that made him go crazy and become the Ice King? In the main Adventure Time finale, he was turned back into his normal self thanks to his old love, Betty, who summoned an unimaginable demon of chaos called Golb and then sacrificed herself to become Golb so that Simon could be safe. Yeah, like I said, this show really expects you to know your Adventure Time lore going in. So Simon is not doing so hot either. He's a 20th century dude who just blinked back into consciousness in an insane, surreal, post-apocalyptic future full of magic and junk. Dude's like a living museum exhibit here. Literally. His house is also a museum exhibit for people to learn about the 20th century. Simon just doesn't fit in with all these new future humans living on an island full of clones of Finn's mom. Please know your lore before watching this show. But he also feels out of place in the more magical parts of Oo too. Plus, his relationship to his past life as the Ice King is complicated, and that complicated relationship also extends to Fionna and Cake, the fanfic that the Ice King wrote. He hates being reminded of them, but they've actually caught on as kind of a popular story series with everyone in Oo, so people are constantly asking him about it. Dude's just lost. He even kind of misses being the Ice King. He's like, things were so simple back then. Sometimes I even like to dress up as the Ice King. I've made the costume myself. I'd go to conventions and everything. There were a lot of people there dressed up like you, Finn.
Damn!
Oh, okay. Maybe not exactly like you now. Yeah, Finn's buff now. Doesn't really matter, just felt like pointing it out since Finn doesn't actually show up too much in this series. Anyway, back at his house, turns out Simon's been into some freaky stuff. He's been secretly working on a spell in order to open a portal to find Golb/Betty. But instead, a portal randomly opens in the back of his head and out pops Cake. And eventually Fionna too. Oh, I get it. Fionna and Cake exist in a physical alternate dimension existing solely inside Simon's head. Okay, I see it. I get it. No, seriously, that makes total sense, as weird as it sounds. Alternate universes are absolutely a thing in Adventure Time, going back to like season 5. See, there's this dude named Prismo the Wishmaster. He's a pink shadow on a wall who exists only in this thing called the Time Room. It's a little yellow cube in space. Prismo grants wishes to people, and those wishes tend to create new wish-altered realities. So Prismo also watches over the resulting multiverse. But you know, one day dude just got bored and decided to make his own universe. But after creating his characters, he realized he kinda just copied Finn and Jake and just ran with it. That's Fionna and Cake. But creating your own universe is a big, like, cosmic no-no. Prismo basically broke some kind of multi-dimensional law by creating an unauthorized world that is literally not allowed to be part of the multiverse. So to hide it, he just zapped it into the Ice King's noggin. Not like he was using it for all that much. But when Ice King lost his magic and turned back into Simon, the magical universe in his brain also got turned into just a normal town in like the late 90s or something. So that's how we got to here. And when Prismo sees that his world has gone rogue and crossed over into another, he panics, zaps Fionna and Cake into the time room, and is like, wait, why are you like that? And he snaps his fingers and boom, Fionna and Cake are now on model. Cake is now a full-fledged magical talking creature, and Fionna got a costume change. Prismo then zaps Simon into the room where we get to see his time buns. Prismo finds out what Simon's been up to, trying to open portals and junk, and they start arguing about it, blah, blah, blah. But they can't really waste too much time because then the Scarab shows up. The Scarab is a quote-unquote god auditor who's out here keeping cosmic entities in line. The crossover between two worlds, one of them being unauthorized, caught his attention, and now he's on the hunt to expose Prismo's crime, turn him into their boss, take down the unauthorized universe, and then take over Prismo's job to control the multiverse himself. That's bad. That's a lot of bad. So, in a last-ditch effort to save them, Prismo gives Fionna and Cake a remote control that lets them hop through the multiverse at will. The Scarab then traps Prismo in this weird little cube prison. Fionna, Cake, and Simon all escape, and just like that, the chase is on. Fionna and Cake are on the run, the Scarab's chasing them through the multiverse, and Simon just kind of there too. Well, okay, that's not fair. Once they're all safe in this random corn dimension, Simon does come up with a plan. In order to save Fionna and Cake's world and make it magical again, he's gonna find another magic crown in the multiverse and use it to become the Ice King again. Yeah, I know he said he kinda hated being the Ice King, but he also kinda hates himself now, so he doesn't really view his life as meaningful, so he's just kind of willing to like just toss it. And no one really questions that, so it's a hunt for the crown. Unfortunately, in this world, the crown was destroyed, straight down to ashes, but they were able to find one of the crown's jewels, using it to mod the remote to track the crown through other universes. So the gang just kind of hop from world to world for a couple of episodes, you know, meeting different universe versions of themselves, who are sometimes really cool, sometimes really lame, and sometimes seem really cool but turn out to be really lame, and you learn a lesson by the end. But throughout the whole thing, no crown. Baby dimension. Baby dimension. Next! After a few hops, the gang lands in a version of Ooh that's just completely barren. No one and nothing anywhere. And to make things worse, their remote is completely busted, so they are stuck. So while they explore the wasteland, Simon tells Fionna all about Betty. How they met, fell in love, went on adventures, and how Betty kind of sacrificed a lot of her future just to be with Simon, in more ways than one. But the sentimental stories get cut short when the gang finds Bimo. Hooray! But then Bimo tells the gang that literally everyone is dead. Nah, poop. But Bimo does try to fix the remote by hooking it up to their robot heart. Hooray! But it doesn't work. Poop. Oh, and Bimo dies. Again. Man, things are not going well. You know, it's times like these in the original series where the only way things could get worse is if the Lich showed up. Oh, come on! So, quick refresher, the Lich is one of the main villains from the original Adventure Time show. Pops up all the time. He's just this evil, monstrous, cosmic entity of death. And this dimension is one where he succeeded in his ultimate goal of eradicating all life on Earth. But you know, with no more life on the planet, dude's got nothing else to do. He's just kind of bummed out, so he's actually not a threat for once. And of course, with all life eradicated and the remote still busted, Fionna, Cake, and Simon are, yeah, they're pretty much toast. So reluctantly, Fionna reveals the crown. Yeah, while exploring the remains of what used to be the Ice Kingdom with Bimo, Fionna and Cake found some old home videos of the Ice King. And not only did Fionna find out where the Ice King hid the crown through these tapes, she also saw how miserable Simon was as the Ice King. So she did grab the crown, hoping Simon wouldn't have to use it, but there's no more options. Simon takes the crown and uses the magic of the Lich to reopen the portal in the back of his head so Fionna and Cake can jump back into their world. But once they're back and safe, the Scarab appears ready to strike. But then, the Lich hijacks Simon's spell, opening another portal that leads to Golb. Betty. Golbetty. It's Golb, but it's Betty. They just call her Golbetty, and I don't like it. And the Lich is like, I am so bored. Please, tell me my new purpose. But then Golbetty turns him into a Tetris block. So, he's dead? I guess? You can never really be sure with that one. But with him out of the way, Simon can finally try and talk to Betty. He tells her all about Fionna and Cake and his plan to become the Ice King again and save their world. But Golbetty is not having it. Remember, Betty spent multiple seasons of the original show trying to turn the Ice King back into Simon. That's why she's Golb in the first place. So to stop him, she zaps Simon to another universe where his consciousness takes over Shermie? The silly little rabbit guy we only ever saw at the very, very end of the Adventure Time finale? Man, they're really pulling out all the obscure Adventure Time lore for this one. While Simon figures out how to navigate all of that, his real body is still frozen back with Golbetty. Just in time for the Scarab, who's also there, to wake up, see the portal to Fionna and Cake's world still open in the back of Simon's head, and finally take his chance to kill Simon and eradicate the rogue universe. But of course, Golbetty's not gonna let that happen. She splits the Scarab into a bunch of tiny little Scarab beetles, but while that might have saved Simon, it doesn't stop the beetles from crawling through the portal and invading Fionna and Cake's world. Things go wrong very quickly. The Scarab beetles overrun Fionna and Cake's world and soon reform into the full-fledged Scarab, who then starts wreaking absolute havoc, zapping bits of the world completely out of existence. Fionna, Cake, and Gary and Marshall, who are actually dating now, Who could have seen that coming? All try to fight back, but the Scarab is just too powerful. And seeing her world just crumbling around her, Fionna realizes that she doesn't want this world to be changed and turned magical. She wants the world she's had this whole time, and she's willing to fight for it so that everyone she knows and loves can either live or die as themselves. Meanwhile, Simon, as Shermie, finds a book on ancient artifacts that dimension's version of Simon wrote, which weirdly takes the form of a choose-your-own-adventure video game book gun thing, and the story is basically a complete allegory for Simon and Betty's relationship. And in playing the game, Simon realizes how often Betty sacrificed things in her life to be with Simon, and how he never really did the same for her. This revelation zaps Simon back into his own body, where he apologizes to Betty and realizes that his life isn't meaningless like he believed before. And with that, Simon's phone rings, and Fionna tells him everything that's going on in her world. Simon nearly puts on the crown to try and help, but Fionna says no. Simon doesn't know what to do, so in a fit of rage, he throws the crown into the abyss. But then, he burps out a dandelion. Okay, this is Fionna's world, apparently. And he just kind of like knows that. He just is like instinctively, he's just like, oh, Fionna's world. What? It's a dandelion and it's pink. And Simon sends the dandelion through his head portal to Fionna. This all sounds so weird when you just have to write it out like this. Fionna makes a wish and blows on the dandelion, spreading its petals all across town. Mirroring this, Betty then picks up Simon and sends him flying back off to his own universe. And all of this, whether it was Golbetty or the dandelion wish or whatever, has actually made Fionna's world legit. It was no longer an unauthorized rogue dimension, it's now part of the multiverse. So all of the Scarab's damage just up and reversed itself. But at this point, Scarab doesn't really care. Authorized or not, he just wants to burn this universe to the ground. But back at the time room, Prismo finally breaks out of that little cube prison he was in and sees what's happening in Fionna's world. So he sends in a cavalry of every single friend Fionna and Cake made across the multiverse to help them fight, including this little squirrel guy with magic fruit from episode 3, who I totally forgot to mention. The magic fruit makes Fionna grow 100 feet tall, and she uses that strength to absolutely squash the Scarab. Their friends then steal the Scarab's weapon and toss it up to Cake, who then uses it to trap the Scarab in this weird little egg thing, and finally, the day is saved. Everyone helps rebuild Fionna's world after all the chaos. The Scarab gets sentenced to become Prismo's apprentice in the time room, and they kind of become friends, I think. And Simon gets a new lease on life back in his own universe. They even show him actually in therapy. Love that for him. And that is Adventure Time Fionna and Cake. This is the best thing Adventure Time's ever done. No joke, I think this is the best, most well-crafted story that has ever come out of the Adventure Time franchise. And the best part is that it uses every single bit of the show's history to do it. Seriously, how many other shows are able to be at the top of their game like this more than a decade after their premiere? It blows my mind. And if this is the note that Adventure Time finally ends on after 13 years, they would be ending on an amazing high note. But who am I kidding? The next 3 seasons, 5 spin-offs, and new mobile game tie-ins have probably already been announced by the time this video even goes up. How am I supposed to pretend you're not over if you never leave?